And we're live now. Good evening, folks. Thanks very much for coming in for the roundup of Witch Week. We did plan to have a bigger panel tonight, but unfortunately, different circumstances, you're stuck with Forrest and myself. So, it is what it is. So, for everybody's to start off tonight, first of all, if you remember last night, for whoever was watching last night, I mentioned Colin from Caledonia team who was gravely ill in hospital, but sadly we found out this morning that he passed away. So we just want to give our thoughts and condolences to all Colin's families, friends, and to the Caledonia team as well. He was a really genuine guy. I had the pleasure of interviewing him last year with the full team, and he really kind of left an impression on you. So he'll be very sadly missed. And we could just spare a wee thought and a wee prayer for him. So that's Colin. He passed away at some point during the night, last night. But on a slightly lighter note, we are adding another team member to our tribe. You probably noticed this young lady to my left, I think. Aye, to my left. She's been popping up and down on the panel. This is Forrest, Glow Switches, as you can see. And she is now officially part of Paranormal in History. So I know we talk all the time, Forrest, but I need to welcome you aboard. You know, that's what they're saying. Welcome aboard, doll. You know.
Well, cheers.
Was that a cheers? Did I hear a cheers there?
And cheers for being my potty. Posse.
Potty? That's what he said, potty. I ain't nobody's potty, man. Know what I mean? He said potty. It's been a long week. I've been live every night this week. This is 6 live now what I've done. I've not done that in my life. You know what I mean? Hey, Simon and Kerry's in. Hey, folks. And tell Wilson to sit down on that couch and stay on the couch. Don't move. So, Witch Week. For everybody's been watching all week, we covered quite a few witch trials throughout the UK. We done North Berwick, Paisley, Pollock, Essex, Salem as well, and a wee bit of Wales and some Edinburgh stuff. So, as you can see, the witch trials weren't just centred around one area. I keep thinking this is moving. I thought that was moving. Maybe it is. No, yeah, actually, you catch something outside of your eye and you think it's moving, but it's really not. Anyway, totally off subject. Hi, Carol, or Sarah's here as well. So, as you can see, the witch trials weren't centred around one particular area in the UK. They were absolutely everywhere between kind of like the 16th and the 17th century. There was thousands of people accused and tried and executed. But today we had the honour of being able to interview a group called Witches of Scotland who were on STV Scotland's news last night. They are actually petitioning for the pardon of all the witch victims. So I've got the interview. We recorded the interview earlier on. We didn't do it as a live. We just recorded it, and I've got it here just now. So I'm going to play it for you just now, so Forrest and I can sit back and we'll play the interview. It's two interesting ladies. So sit back, folks, and this is Witches of Scotland, Zoe and Claire. Hi, folks. Just as a little extra to tonight's live, we've got a little special treat for you. As you know, tonight is rounding off Witch Week. We've been talking about various witch trials in the UK, Scotland, England, and Wales. But we're very honoured that we've managed to capture these two ladies underneath me for about 15, 20 minutes. I want to introduce you to Zoe and Claire from Witches of Scotland, who were on STV television in Scotland last night. And they're kindly agreed to come in this afternoon and just have a wee quick chat with us and tells about a bit about herself and a campaign that they're currently running. So thanks very much, ladies, for coming in.
Thanks for having us on.
Yep. So it's our pleasure to have you on. So can you tell us just a wee bit Witches of Scotland, how it started out and how you both kind of met up and got involved?
Well, Claire, do you want to describe that?
Okay, yeah, I'll start. I have had an interest in history for many, many years, but I'm a lawyer that specialises in appeal cases that have to do with miscarriages of justice. So I look at miscarriage of justice cases on a daily basis. And that combined with my interest in Scottish history, in particular the witch trials, I'd always had that sort of in the background as I was, working in Edinburgh, and you go up and you see the witches' well, and you know that women were killed there. So I knew that from the history. And occasionally when I was looking at things, I'd come across things in a book here or there that mentioned the witch trials, and I'd always want to read about it. But the campaign really kicked off when I was down in Princess Street Gardens one day in Edinburgh. I was walking with 2 wee dogs, and in Princess Street Gardens, I was standing around looking at all the statues, and I was looking around thinking, where are the statues of women? And I just read a brilliant book by a woman called Sarah Sheridan, who wrote a book called Where Are the Women? And it's about taking all the statues that are in Scotland of men and putting them in as women instead. So I had this sort of idea in my head. And I looked around and I thought, not only are there no statues of women doing good things or showing brilliant things that women have done, but right over underneath the castle in Edinburgh at the Esplanade, there's an area where I know 300 women were executed as witches. And there's not so much as a mark to them or anything. What is actually there is something called the Witches' Well, and it says that women were killed here as witches. I think I say women or people were killed here as witches, and some used their powers for good and some used their powers for evil, and that's basically it. So it's not even a commemoration of women. So really from there, all those ideas came together. The idea about the fact that we don't have something to commemorate all these people that were killed as witches, the fact that they suffered a terrible miscarriage of justice, and I thought, I really want to do something about this. So I stomped home, dragging my 2 wee doggies with me, and I ended up at home, and I just sat and I just wrote out really what it was that I would like to see. And what it was, or the 3 aims of the campaign that we have are, first of all, a pardon for all those convicted as witches. So that's a pardon we're asking from the Scottish Government. We have already got our petition up live online. Over 1,000 people have already signed that. If people go to www.witchesofscotland.com, they'll be able to get links there to the Parliament site if they want to sign it as well. But the people who were convicted of witchcraft are only a part of the story, because actually a lot of people were tortured for their confession. Some of them were tortured physically with horrible things, thumb screws and things like that. And some of them were tortured mentally. They weren't allowed to sleep. And what used to happen to these women is that, and it was, I say women because in Scotland, about 85% of the people accused and convicted of witchcraft were women. It's about 85%. Are women, so that's just why I use that. But there were men obviously involved too. But these women were tortured, and some women died as a result of their torture, and never were convicted, or some were even accused, and their whole life was ruined. They were tortured, but for some reason, they never went to trial. So not only do we want an apology for those we want a pardon for those convicted, but we also want an apology for all those who never made it to trial for whatever reason, all those that were accused as witches. And the third thing, and I think this is really important, what we want is a national memorial, some kind of, I don't know if it's a building or a structure or a statue or a place, but somewhere that shows what happened in the history of Scotland. And as we were talking with Sam, Shelley, and yourself, Scott, just before we came on, and just discussing how 300 years ago is the blink of an eye in terms of history. It's not a long time ago that these things happened, 300, 400 years ago. So we really think it's important of a national memorial. And I was delighted when I took my idea to my friend Zoe Venditozzi. Perhaps Zoe can introduce herself and say what we've done from here.
Okay, so Claire and I met, I think maybe at a party. Remember those things? All those years ago, we could get together and drink and laugh and have fun. I think we met at a party and we were talking about how we were both big fans of true crime podcasts. And that's kind of, I think, how we sort of bonded initially. And Claire said to me, "Oh, I've got this thing that I'm wanting to do." And then, we got to each other a bit better, and then the ball started rolling. And the thing that Claire wanted to do was this campaign. But to do the campaign and to really learn about the sort of issue and to tell other people about it too, her idea was to have the podcast. So the podcast Witches of Scotland started, we launched the campaign on International Women's Day last March. And then, as Claire often jokes, we obviously didn't have any psychic ability to know that everything was going to shut down 2 weeks later. So it kind of went on hold for a bit, and we launched.
We're not witches. We didn't.
We're not witches. We're not. We have no special skills in that nature, anyway. And then in, I think, September or so, we started recording and releasing podcasts. And our aim has always been: we're not experts. We're not the only people in Scotland or indeed the world that have an interest in rehabilitating the image of witches or marking them or educating. We're just really interested people who are from Scotland and want to know about it and tell other people what we find out. So what we do is each episode we get a different expert on, or a different person who's got a different interest in some aspect of the past, and they tell us whatever their information is that they've got. So it's been brilliant because we've learned absolutely loads over the time we've been recording. I mean, I grew up here. I went to school here. I live in Fife, which was, a fair amount of witchcraft business in Fife. Knew nothing about it other than there were witches burned in Scotland. And my idea was from Tam O'Shanter, and it was about witches with the hats and the cats and the cauldrons and the brooms. But that's all I knew about it. I was absolutely shocked and still remain shocked to find out that there was a conservative estimate about 2,500 people, 85% of whom were women, were executed in Scotland. And each week we do something, we found out something else that I didn't know about. So there's just so much to know, and it's such a fascinating subject. As somebody that's interested in history, it's fascinating, but just the cost, the human cost of that, and the fact that we're not taught about it really in school, and that it's something in our past as Scots that we really need to kind of think about and make peace with so we can move forward. So that's where we're at just now. We've got, I think we're on 24 episodes and we release them weekly. And we've still got lots of guests. And every time we release an episode, we get loads of contact from people that have heard it that say, "Oh, do you know about this?" Or "Can you look into that?" Or "This would be a good guest for you to have." So I don't see it finishing anytime soon either. There's so much to talk about. And I'm sure you're the same, that there's just always something else that's really interesting to investigate.
It's very, very similar. I mean, podcasts, we started the YouTube channel when we ended up getting back into lockdown again. So we couldn't go out investigating, so we decided to get down the interview road, you know, to keep the channel running. And the amount of people that we've met over the last 6 months or so has been, including yourselves, obviously, is unbelievable. We've made so many friends, and we've learned so much just for doing these podcasts. And there is always something, different to learn, especially with the witch. I mean, I'm from Glasgow, same as Shelley, and Ellie covered the Glasgow and Paisley witches on Thursday, I think it was, Shelley.
Thursday it was, Big
And I learned stuff that I didn't have a clue about. And I was in Glasgow for decades, and I couldn't, I'd never heard of any witch trials in Glasgow until Shelley brought it up. I thought, all right, wait a minute. I knew nothing about it, especially Paul and Paisley area as well. We're both from the Paul area, so we did not have a clue. So I totally get what you're talking about. That you do constantly find stuff, learn stuff, meet people, and I think that's the beauty of the internet as well. Even though we're all locked out, the circumstances today, we can still get together for people from different parts of the country or the world, and still sit down and have a chat and learn things.
That's right.
Over the internet. But Sam, she works in the NHS. I think she's got a wee question for you about the midwifery side of the witchcraft.
Yeah, I done my witch night on the North Berwick witches, which was mainly focused on Gelly Duncan and Agnes Sampson. So it was Agnes Sampson was deemed as a healer, but Gelly Duncan was deemed as a midwife, but that was seen as the mark of the witch because she was able to deliver babies and whatever else and take pain away and things like that. What's your feelings or thoughts on this? Do you believe that witches have been misconcepted slightly and that they're deemed a witch just because it's easy to deem them like that?
Joy, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that absolutely that's what's happened in some of the cases. There's through the different experts who've spoken to, there seems to be quite a range of reasons why women and some men were accused for being witches, and definitely the issue about being a healer or being a midwife or working with herbs or those sorts of things were definitely some of the reasons why some women were accused and then unfortunately executed. And I suppose it must be down to a fear or looking to blame somebody. We were talking to a guest recently about the psychological reasons for that. People would look for someone to blame. If something went wrong and say maybe a woman lost her baby or the baby was born, and had problems or whatever, or the mum didn't recover, you'd be angry and maybe grieving, and then an easy thing to do might be to blame the person that was supposed to deliver the baby safely. So I think that sort of thing is the kind of thing they're hoping to uncover and look into more. And I think definitely, there's a fear there that if there were some women that were able to heal, then I suppose there might have been a fear if people weren't terribly educated on it, to think that they might hold a power that they were scared of. If they had the power to heal, they might also have the power to harm. So I suppose there would be that fear there as well. But I think that definitely when they're doing the research with it, is it the Royal College of Nurses, Claire?
Yeah, we were absolutely delighted when I was contacted by a Dr. Nicola Ring, who is a person who asked me whether or not I would be interested in discussing with her the Witches of Scotland campaign and what we were all about. And she explained that what she wanted to do was apply for research funding because in her work as a nurse, she she did some lecturing, and she said that to start some of her lectures, she would say to young nurses coming in, "Do you know the history of nursing in Scotland? Is the history of witches?" You know, to get people
Yeah,
interested.
we were told that as well. That's one of the things we were told.
So there you go. It might have been her. I don't know if it was maybe her that told you that. But she explained that there was this history, and what she had done research already by the time I spoke to her, and now she got funding basically to look at a number of people who are identified or have been identified through the record as either nurses, a type of healers, or midwives. And they have got funding to look at these people's stories and to try and sort of bring the stories back to the 21st century and look at the stories of these people accused as witches. You said one of the most tragic things that I thought found out about midwives was some women who tried to relieve the pain of childbirth for other women by using herbs or by using whatever they had available to them at the time. That was deemed magic because the idea was that God had given you this pain, so obviously you just had to bear it and you shouldn't have it taken away. If it was being taken away, that was some kind of magic. So we're really, really pleased that Dr. Nicola Ring, our associates, got that funding for it. And it's just at the very, very start. But they've already looked up, I think, the Survey of Scottish Witchcraft online, which is a great resource. You can put in things like the dates or the places or what type of witchcraft people were accused of. And they've been able to identify, I think, about 150 out of the entire database. I think the database is something like 3,000 maybe in total, perhaps a bit more. And they've been able to identify 150 cases that they're going to take forward and bring the story of these women into the 21st century. So we were so delighted when we found out about it, and we're so pleased to be associated with them bringing the story back to us.
Oh, that's fantastic. It definitely is. I mean, see all these souls that they've been like executed, and there's so many unrested souls there that have been left, and just to have their memory, just to know that they have never done anything wrong, and to let everybody else know, to let the public know that these people were innocent. They were just accused. And it's just so sad. For trying to do a good thing, they were then told and executed for the pleasure of just trying to help someone. So I think what you are doing is really, really good. And also your ethos of how you are actually working as a group as well. That's really good. It works just the same as us when we're no experts either. So we're just trying to learn as we go and understand the history and what happened. So to be able to bring that forward for everybody else would make such a big difference, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that Claire and I keep coming back to is that something that's on the memorial in Orkney, I think it is. Is that right, Claire? Where it says, what is it? It says on the memorials.
It says that in the sort of Orkney way of saying it, they were just folk. They were just folk. They were just people. And it's just a beautiful stone up in Orkney that's carved.
Yeah.
Because everybody's somebody, aren't they? Everybody's got a story. Right. Everybody's their individual. Yeah. And touching on what you said earlier about obviously the torture method and things that some of these women and men were going through. To be fair, after so many days of like medieval torture, I think I would confess to being a witch as well, just to get rid of the pain, rather than actually be it, because the torture alone was.
One of the things apparently that Scotland did particularly well with torturing people that were accused of witchcraft was sleep deprivation. So in Scotland, supposedly, we were seen as being less violent than other places, like they were in England, for example, or they were, abroad, because we were less inclined to use torture instruments, but more inclined to use psychological torture of keeping people awake for days and days, and you know, prodding them and poking them and looking at them, and you know, just so that eventually the person's mind just is, you know, you're like you're saying, you'd give up anything basically, you'd say anything for it to stop.
That's it. Just
So,
to
We go mad. I found that when I was doing the Bargarin, which is that I didn't really see any, there wasn't really anything published about the kind of torture methods that we use, and so I was kind of thinking it was just maybe the sleep deprivation, but that in itself, where they were kept, would have been enough to drive them insane, and they would just have been
torture, absolute torture.
Yeah.
sad.
I mean, what the other thing was, is it wasn't enough to confess to being a witch yourself. So that you confess to being a witch yourself, that didn't stop the torture. They would then be at you to see who else was in your coven.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
that's it.
you
They'll
would
look
have
at your
slept for
family as
days,
well.
And they're talking to you about the devil and having sex with the devil. And where were you? And you were dancing with the devil. And who was playing the music? And who was there with you? Was it this woman? That woman? And by that time, people would be delirious. I mean, they've done studies to say that depriving people of sleep can basically completely psychologically break you in every way. And these people, by the time that they were given confessions saying, oh, this woman was there with me, that woman was there, they were saying that not usually, I don't not imagine just to try and get people into trouble, but because by the time that they were being asked about it, maybe days into having no sleep whatsoever, they didn't know what was real and what wasn't real anymore. Somebody was talking to them about witches and devils for 3 days and kept them awake.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about anyone else in their sleep, but if I don't get 8 hours sleep, I'm a gibbering wreck the next day. Never mind keeping me awake for 3 or 4 days.
Just before we wind up, ladies, I know you're busy ladies. You seem to be quite an impact in the short time you've been running, and also we want you to keep going. We were on TV last night. We were on STV Scotland last night.
Yep.
On the news. Can you tell us just a wee snippet about that?
Well, that was to basically talk about the story with the Royal College of Nurses. So they brought us on to talk about that and just a bit of background with the campaign. So I mean, it's obviously people are interested in it. You know, we've had different people being in touch with us with that. We've been in lots of newspapers this week as well. And that's a lot of that's on the back of the Royal College of Nurses this particular week. But we've also been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal last week. We've been interviewed by journalists in Spain. We've had people contacting us from all over the world that are interested in it because, you know, witchcraft is still an issue in some countries. You know, it's like witchcraft trials and accusations and people being shunned and stigmatized. It's an ongoing issue in some places. And there's, you know, I'm sure you'll find the same, that there's people all over America and Canada, for example, that are very interested in Scotland's history and are very keen to get involved. So we've had people from all over the world getting in touch. So it's great. It's good because the more people that know about it, the more likely we are to get the pardon and the apology and the state monument. You know, I think if we can prove that there's a public appetite for it, we're more likely to be successful.
Fingers crossed. I mean,
thanks.
No, you're all right. I'm just saying, fingers crossed that everything goes so well. I mean, having a national monument would be.
Where is your podcasts listed about? Where are they played?
Where are we, Claire?
Everywhere, pretty much. I mean, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify.
Right,
if you just go to the website, you can just put in Witches of Scotland podcast and it will come up. But if you go to the website and click on it, it should direct you to whichever one that you've got downloaded on your phone, kind of thing, if you already listen to podcasts. And also there, you can also click the link that will take you straight to the Scottish Government petition. And hopefully we can get more people to sign that as well. I saw Zoe's right. We have, we've had over 1,000 signatures. I think 1,300 at the moment. We've still got a month to go, so people can still sign for a month. And I checked this morning, and there were people signing from Mexico and Argentina.
Wow.
So it's got worldwide reach. People are so interested. And I was listening to a podcast about Salem witch trials the other day, and it was from people in Salem that run their sort of visitor centre there. And the woman was saying that she was always amazed when people come over from Scotland and say, "Oh, tell us about your Salem witch trial. Tell us all about what happened." And she was always amazed to think, your country is steeped in the history of witchcraft trials, and you don't seem to know about it. She said she was always surprised. So we're really, really keen to try and remember these men and women that got caught up in this horrific miscarriage of justice, and try now to do what we can to put that right in any way. And that's basically what we're all about.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing how it progresses.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.
And it'll be good to get a wee catch up at some point when you're near to your goal and actually find out how well it's actually going and what your next process is and how you're going to approach it, because it's been really interesting.
Good.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
Contact, and we'll let you know. We'll update you as we go along.
No problem. Thank you very much.
If you want to send me your links, you PM me your links, and I'll get them up on the page, and I'll get them on the Parrot Unity page as well, and they'll get shared out far and wide. Just one last thing for let you go. Just a wee point you made, Claire. It's nothing to do, but what it has to do is not to do with witchcraft. I've been to Princess Street Gardens many, many times. I love Edinburgh, and I've took many along, and I've never ever noticed. I've looked at all the statues. I've never ever noticed it was so just male statues. So I've learned something today as well.
Well, that's because you're a man. That's because you're a man. Because you're moving through the world, and it's designed for your eyes. That's the thing, and it's amazing. We move through the world, and we take it for granted that we're not going to see ourselves. But that's something that we've really opened our eyes to. Now I really notice it, and I'm walking around and like, you might see Queen Victoria. I live near Dundee, and I think that's the only statue of a woman there. There's one of Queen Victoria outside of McManus, but there's loads of men. They're all like soldiers and whatever, kings. But you just don't get women. And one of the things that it cracked me up at the same time when Claire told me this, but it also annoyed me, was she said that there's a statue there of a life-size statue of a bear, Wojciech the bear, and there's a statue of a dog called Bum, but there's no statue of a woman, like a named woman.
Aye.
So there's a dog and a bear and hundreds of men, but no women. So yeah.
See, I'm a Borders girl. I'm from Hawick originally, and it's all male statues down there as well.
It's the same length and breadth of Britain. It's not just Scotland. It's it's everywhere. Yeah.
But this is we hope that there is someday in the near future some sort of memorial, some sort of statue.
Even a plaque, even just a plaque as recognition.
Yeah.
Even just so there's some recognition, just so they're not forgotten, and that they are actually remembered for being women and for being who they are as a person.
So,
Scott can't talk because he's the only man in the panel.
Well, that's an answer.
We love men. We've got men in our lives. I've got sons. No problem with men. I just want to see, I want there to be statues so that my daughter can walk down the street and she can see somebody that reminds her of herself and makes her think, yeah, I can be somebody, and women are important too. And I think that's we just want parity. And there was just so many women were killed in the witch trials. Yeah. Just so many, just insanely nuts.
There was a lot of innocent women went to their death. So I'll just keep a hold of 2 years for a couple of seconds after I end the interview, if that's all right. So thanks for coming in, Zoe and Claire, and we wish you all the very best on your campaign. And we hopefully we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
And that was that. I sounded drunk in that interview. Do you think I sounded happy, even though I don't drink? I was actually cringing. Do you ever cringed inside your body? You know, you're sitting in your...
What am I doing? What am I doing?
I can assure you, people, I was totally sober. But I was sitting listening to like a wee drunkie in Glasgow on a Saturday night. You know. However, that was that, folks. That was Witches of Scotland, who came in to see us briefly this afternoon. So they were on TV last night, talking about their campaign, what have you. We put all the links on our Facebook page, Instagram, Facebook, and we have put the link to their website and also the link to the petition. So, you know, please go on and give it a wee look and, you know, sign it if you know, if you want. But all the links are on our Facebook page. Hi, Rebecca. Just before we carry on, Justin was saying, have you ever heard of the Selwood witches?
I can't say I have, no.
So the only witches I know of locally are the Selwood. Other than that, I don't know. We'll have to have a look. I've never ever heard of the Selwood witches. So what did you think, Forrest, of the Witches of Scotland? What did you think in the chat as well? What did you think of the two ladies?
It's very knowledgeable, isn't it? How it's interesting how people get into what they're into. You know, she was walking her dogs and just decided to start looking at history. And what they said about female statues, I never thought I'd say this, but my hometown of Wolverhampton has a big statue of Lady Wulfruna, who founded Wolverhampton. So we've got that outside the St Peter's Church. Big, really big Saxon woman, and it's fantastic. So maybe that's where I get my inspiration from.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I've been in Princess Street Gardens many times and went for, you know, walks and what have you. And you look at this. Hi, Wayne, buddy, thanks for coming in. You look at the statues, but you don't look at them. You know, you can give them a look and that's big, or, you know, that's nice. And it's something I'd never ever noticed. So the next time I'm in Princess Street Gardens, I'm going looking. You know,
go look.
I need to go to Greyfriars first, and then I'll head down to Princess Street Gardens and examine the statues in a good way. I mean, examine.
I know which one you'd like to see. You'd like to see the Lady Godiva statue in Coventry. Oh yes. Naked dancing on a horse with a long flowing hair covering a naughty bit.
Oh, I see a naked bit of stone. You know, I really don't see the appeal. You're a very strange lady. Anyway, so what do you think of the idea of the petition to get the victims pardoned?
Yeah, I saw it online earlier actually, and I thought, yeah, I'll sign that because I think it's something that needs to be done, isn't it? They pulled down the Slavers statue in Bristol and other places, and I think, you know, the petition is on the same par as that for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it ever will happen? But
I think it probably could, yeah, because at the end of the day, witchcraft was just a massive fad, wasn't it? It's a massive fad. It's like Windows 10. Everyone thought, yeah, let's jump on the Windows 10 wagon, and then, yeah, a couple of years later, they'd forgotten about it. It was rubbish. So I think, yeah, go for it.
They are two very interesting ladies, and we will be getting them back on towards probably the end of April, we're hoping, when our diary's a wee bit thinner, because I'd love to sit and chat to them more, but they could only give us about 20-25 minutes today. So that's how we to do the pre-recorded one, but I'm dying to sit and have another wee chat with them, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So what,
I like
I mean, you've obviously watched the witch trials all week, the lives. What's your opinion on Witch Week? I'm putting you on the spot now.
No, that's good. I have lots of, well, I say lots in my in my world. There's lots. I've got facts and fiction. Disclaimer: fiction. But just a few points that people touched on. Like you mentioned cats the other night. Why are cats associated with witches? So I looked into that, and it comes from Norse mythology. This is one idea. Norse mythology, the goddess Freya rode a chariot pulled by magical cats. Freya was also in charge of the death in the afterlife and known for practicing witchcraft. So there's one. Then we've got the Greek goddess of the underworld, which is Bast, B-A-S-T, and she was represented by a cat as well. Also, some witches claimed that they could shift into cats, so they didn't really help themselves being associated with cats. Cats are nocturnal. They go out, they've got glowing eyes, and they're sitting there all conspicuous on people's walls. So I think people were quick to point to cats as being witches' familiars and working for them. And sometimes they thought cats were human, so they would round up all the black cats and throw them on the fires. So that's one thing for you.
But did the Egyptians not see cats as well as was it the guardians of the underworld or something?
Well, cats were praised, weren't they, in Egypt? They were gods. So who knows? North mythology and Greek mythology are to do with the underworld and witchcraft. So there you go. It's different for different countries, I suppose. Moving on to, you couldn't find that much information about the Welsh witches.
That's
You
the
did
thing.
mention Denbighshire, didn't you? I'm sure you mentioned Denbighshire in one of the lives.
Well, did you listen? Did I tell you I listened to it? Some of my pronunciations were way off. I mean, see some of the words, and they were just, I did try my best, and I do apologise if it went boobs up with something, because some of the letters don't actually, no offence to the Welsh language or whatever, but some of the letters actually don't go together. If you know what I mean, they still make a word, There's Justin saying his wife has the book.
Has the
Cheryl, my wife, had the book.
Norse mythology, maybe?
Possibly.
I'm not sure. But we had in Wales, there was a couple of witches that I found some information on. There was an Anne Jones who was indicted for felonious witchcraft in Denbigh in 1635. She went around falsely claiming to cure people's ailments with fairies. Oh, Selwood, there you go.
Thank you, Justin.
So yeah, she was curing people's babies with the power of fairies, and when it didn't work, obviously they thought, you're a fraud, you killed our baby. She was sentenced to a year in jail but died 3 months in, and she didn't last very long. I wonder if the fairies got her. Who knows? Then we had Gwen Ellis, who was hung in 1594 in Denbigh. She was also claiming to be a healer. And she got found out because they went to search her house and she had a charm on a wall. And she says, that's my healing charm. But they realised that it was written backwards. So they associated that with Satan because, Satan does everything backwards, apparently. And she was hung in 1594 for that, for having a charm written backwards. So it's quite interesting that only 25% of the women accused of witchcraft were killed. So, 75% got off scot-free. Who knows where the logic comes from, Scott? We just don't know, do we?
That's it. I mean, I remember saying last night that between, when a warrant was issued for the arrest of a suspected witch in Wales, there was a delay, usually before they ended up in court. And some of the magistrates they basically didn't know how to deal with, prosecute witches.
Well, I think every county must have had a different way of dealing with them. It sounds like the higher powers were just thinking, hang on a minute, you can't just kill all these women for that. What are you doing? Before they stepped in and, put a stop to it eventually. But it was a very slow burner, wasn't it? It went on for 14 months, the witch trials, I think. But even so, people into witchcraft have been persecuted for centuries. I looked at art, depictions of witches in art from the 1600s onwards, and it's gone on for hundreds of years. There were old hags, there were crones, there were grotesque, and then through the ages, you've got paintings by John Waterhouse, who's a pre-Raphaelite, and he does the Magic Circle, I think it is. It's a beautiful young witch, just looking all independent round a fire, and there were a lot more alluring later on. So interesting how it changes.
Denby, you mentioned Denby before, isn't you?
Yeah, I think there was 4 or 5 women in Denby that were accused of witchcraft, but I think most of them were released. I think there was only 1 out of 5 that was hung. So not many. There's nothing in Shropshire either. I looked around Shropshire and the West Midlands. They're just like devoid of all witches. So here I am representing Wales and Shropshire. There's also,
they seem to be well behaved, didn't they, in that part of the country for some reason?
Maybe we were more reserved. I don't know. It's just a bit weird. But there was also a song by a guy called Christy Moore that I used to play on the guitar years ago. He's an Irish dude, and he did a song called The Burning Times. Now, in his words, he says that 9 million women were killed. So I started researching The Burning Times, and it was actually a documentary about the European witch hunt. I don't know if you've heard of it. Stop me if you've heard this one.
Mm-hmm.
But the claim of 9 million women seems to be a myth, and it was just a guesstimate over 11 centuries from 1600 to 1700. And it consisted of men and women. So that's a guesstimate of how many people in Europe killed over several hundred years, many centuries. But I don't think that's very true. So his song now, I question. And he also said that hundreds of women joined hands and walked into the sea because they weren't going to be killed. So they decided their own fate, and they all joined forces and they walked into the sea and drowned themselves. I can't find any information on that either. It was quite an interesting thought, but I think that's also a myth. Yeah, I've kind of stirred the hornet's nest really today. Found a lot of myths.
Opened the can of worms.
Mm.
You opened the can of worms.
And then I started looking at torture methods because I'm like that.
Mm-hmm.
Heretic's fork. Have you heard of that one? The heretic's fork was a spike that they strapped around on a collar, and there's a spike there, and it went to your chest. So you couldn't put your head down, you couldn't sleep, you couldn't look down, you had to live with this spike. If you fell asleep, that would skewer you. So that's the heretic's fork.
I've seen that
also,
one.
Have you seen it?
I've seen it a long time. I can't remember where I've seen it, but I know I've seen that one. It's just with that, and we can't do nothing.
Yeah. Shocking. They had a miniature one as well that they put under your eye, and they stick it under your eyelid. So when you blink, you rip your eyelid. And I just thought, how do people think this stuff up? Vile creatures.
I'm sorry if anybody's cringing in the chat with that one, but I had a wee cringe myself. It's kind of...
I've got a real eye thing as well, so I don't like anything to do with eyes, man. They also had the Pilney wink, which was the thumb screws. They had Caspi claws, which were leg irons that they heated up in the fire and put around your ankles. I mean, torture was actually illegal during these witch trials, but I think they ushered them to the side and sort of thought, oh, get her when no one's looking, do a bit of torture. So, I mean, how you can endure red hot leg irons for more than a second or two, I don't know. So poor women that had to go through that, and anyway, Moving on, a pair of anguish, a pear-shaped bit of metal that can fit in any orifice and be widened by screwing it open. And they use that to put in your mouth and crack your jaw.
Thank
Lovely.
God you said mouth.
It says more about the witch hunters, doesn't it, than the witches? I mean, you know, just because your harvest didn't grow that year or your pig fell ill, you have the pair of anguish up your bum or in your mouth, or it doesn't bear thinking about. Look, it's horrific.
Did you ever say just 2 seconds ago about torture was illegal? It was. That was the thing that I was surprised between England and Wales. Also in 1563, as we said the other night, the Witchcraft Act was passed by Parliament, and and the same year Scotland passed its own Witchcraft Act. But the English one, torture was forbidden. It wasn't, it was illegal. But in Scotland, the Scottish Witchcraft Act included torture and also the wee side bit that if you spoke to a witch or anybody suspected you could be hung as well. So that shows you the difference between the two sides of the border. You were allowed to inflict pain on one side, but so I think we're better off going to England to be a witch. Well, you go to Wales.
We always knew you Scottish barbarians, didn't we?
I think if I was a witch back then, I would have buggered off to Wales because I don't think anybody was looking for witches down in Wales. There was natives, so I had been off to Wales. Yeah.
Now, it's funny you should mention that actually, because I've got a quote here out of my dissertation. It was written in Duhane's Law Dictionary, and it states that according to the law books of the Middle Ages, which is from 400 to 1600 AD, the act of invoking evil spirits or consulting with, covenanting with, entertaining, employing, feeding, or rewarding any evil spirit would send you, you'd be as bad as them. So if you was to employ a witch, feed a witch, I darn my socks, love, I've got an hole in. Oh, you're as bad as her, burn them both. It's shocking. So if you even looked at a witch, basically, you're a witch and you're as bad as them. So it's shocking, really.
Wayne said it was the witch hunters that was the evil ones, I think.
Yeah, it's old Hoppers, isn't it? Matthew Hopkins, what a knob. Nobody liked him. He was just out to get some quick cash as quick as he could before they figured out he was a fraud. So, yeah, it just set off a frenzy, didn't it? The witch hunt frenzy.
It did. I think that's the Witchcraft Act actually did. It gave people just a license to. I mean, prior to that, obviously there'd been witches and there'd been, witches arrested and hung, what have you. But I think they were dealt with within their community. But after that act was passed, I think it was just basically a license to go out on witches and accuse anybody. Whereas before, I think you would have to have proved it a wee bit more.
Well, I've got this last part here. I've actually got a copy of The Discovery of Witches written by Hoppers, and it's got 7 points that they look for in the introduction. So these were the rules of, hunting witches. Do you want to hear them?
Carry on, yep.
Okay, number 1. They have ordinarily a familiar or spirit which appeareth to them. 2. Their said familiar hath some big or place upon their body where he sucketh them. So a mole, a birthmark, a third nipple, something like that they're looking for, which, goes on the witch pricking when they used to prick the moles to see if they could feel any pain. If they didn't feel any pain when he pricked the mole, that meant they were a witch. But his trick was he had a 3-inch spring-loaded needle, and it went in so quick that no one felt it. So fraudulent claim, Hoppers. So there you go. Number 3, they often have pictures of clay or wax like men found in their home, so like voodoo dolls or puppets. If the dead body bleeds upon the witch touching it, so I guess if they touch the body of a corpse and it bleeds, they're a witch. 5, the testimony of the person hurt upon their death, goes without saying. 6, the examination and confession of the children or servants of the witch. Luckily, all my minions think I'm all right.
You're fine.
7, and the last one is their own voluntary confession, which exceeds all other evidence. So there you go. You've got waxy dolls, you're in the bin. If you've got a third nipple, you're out.
And you think, even in this day and age, many people actually have a birthmark, even if it's the slightest, the slightest wee mark on them. But back then,
I think it was any mole. Any mole. She's got a mole. Stick a pin in it that she can't feel. She's a witch because she can't feel it. Shocking. So there's the conclusion.
That's how society was, but they were so naive as well. As soon as you mentioned the words witch, people tend to out. As soon as the word was mentioned, as we're saying, and people were accusing, their own family members, their own children, of being witches. Children were accusing their own parents of being witches. This day and age, if you're a teenager, if you take the mobile phone off your teenager, she says, I hate you, and goes to the room. But back then, obviously, no mobile phones. But if you fell out with your teenage daughter, then all she had to do is, my dad's a witch, my mum's a witch. That's all it took.
I mean, here I've got, non-conformists, mentally ill, or groups of women who met in secret were not spared the accusations. Such women of ill character who refused to conform were generally tortured and killed for their non-compliance. So groups of women who met in secret, they were persecuted. They're all, sitting round henpecking. Oh, it's shocking, really, isn't it? Can't have a secret society of women or a tea afternoon because you're a witch.
Aye, exactly. Just normal people going about their normal lives, and I used to say, if you had red hair, you were a witch. If you weren't married, you were a witch. If you lived alone, and a witch, you were a witch. The amount of things, I've been through the other night. There's some of the things that you could be accused of doing if you were the wrong colour. If your skin was maybe darker than your neighbours, you're a witch. Your age.
That happens in a lot of cultures, though, doesn't it? I mean, if you've watched Rabbit Proof Fence with the Aboriginals, if your skin wasn't a certain tone, you went to the slave camps. If it was, a darker tone, a lighter tone, then you were taken into white people houses and given nice jobs. So it's something that crosses a lot of cultures, and witches were no different, were they? There's some people that there was a harvest. Somebody had a bad harvest the one year, and they just blamed a woman in the village. Where's your proof? Like, isn't there supposed to be some evidence? You can't just say, "Oh, it was Jean over there." None of our blooming corn grew there with a haggard face, burner. Oh, it's terrible.
I'll get no corn this year. You know what I mean? So it's her fault, and she ends up the end of her rope. And your age could go against you as well. Because obviously I think last night we said the average lifespan was about 35 years then, which was the sort of average for the whole of the UK. And I mean, Elizabeth Brendite with Pendle, she was 85, and there was somebody else at 80. And they were both accused of being witches, partly because of their age. So back then you'd be hoping, I'm 35 next birthday, you'd be hoping to snuff it, because as soon as you go to 40, people would be thinking, that Satan's looking after you. That's how you're living longer than normal. Do you know what I mean? Hi, Steve. Here's Wayne's got a question for you. I know you're a big Matthew Hopkins fan.
Not a fan, mate. Do you think back in the days of Hopkins, if he heard of paranormal investigators like us, he would have hanged us like he did witches? Of course, man. It's the occult. It's not, it's against the church. It's not Christian. You're invoking spirits. You're talking to the spirits. We'd be in the bin, mate. We'd be hung. We'd be burned.
That,
Yeah,
that's
def-
that's a good question, Wayne. I've not been asked that all week, but he's got a good point there. I mean, obviously, even today, paranormal investigators and mediums and all that are seen as, evil. Even folk like us, if we go hunting the graveyard, just seen it's a sin. So I would imagine back then, if you were caught in a graveyard or a church or whatever, then you were definitely for the off law said definitely when paranormal investigators would have been seen as using witchcraft. Yeah.
the art of invoking spirits or consulting or covenanting with. Yes, that would be us. We'd be persecuted for that, definitely. We're in
That would
league with Satan.
that would be us actually, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Spirit world is not normal, is it? So it's it's to do with Satan and demons and all that business. Yeah,
So,
we'd be dead.
why do you think I'm going back to Wales again? Because I'm still trying to get my head round the sort of. It's not that I'm disappointed. It sounds bad. I'm disappointed. I'm not the sort of lack of activity in Wales as compared to the rest of the UK. Why? Any idea why that would be? Because I've looked and looked, but I can't find any sort
No,
of.
it's I wasn't sure if you've got like a set number of witch hunters, like Hoppers and a couple of his mates, that just went to villages and areas that they knew, and it was very localised. But the fact that there's no witches in Shropshire, West Midlands, and Wales is very odd, isn't it? It's all like almost like it was up there. So where was Hoppers from? I don't actually know where he was born. I think it was up north.
He
So
was
maybe
on the east side of the. Was he on the east side of the country? I think some people think I'm married to pick up his spirits. I was called a male witch by one. I said, thank you. I suppose that's a bit of a compliment, isn't it? Hawkins, I think he was. I know he was commissioned by the king to do
well,
to to do the witch hunting, but I think as time went on, it was he was doing the king's work, but as the time went on, he just got carried away because then he started seeing it as I can make a lot of money here, and basically,
kings, didn't one of the kings write a book called Demonology as well? So that
King,
might have spurred people on to make a quick quid or two.
the King James VI wrote that book in 1690, I think it was. He wrote that book because he started to question the 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 probability of there being real witches, and that's when the witch trial started to calm down. Because what he
Yeah,
did,
so
he started to install judges in the English courts that didn't agree with torture and that wanted a more thorough examination. There was four, after about 30 years after the Pendle witch trials, there was four people who from the same area who were accused of witchcraft. And what happened was, whereas the original Pendle lot were taken to Lancaster Castle, tried and hung, these four were actually sent to London and they were examined. And the men who examined them came back to the king and says, we can find no evidence of witchcraft here. And they were sent back to Pendle.
okay. So he was a good guy then, that king.
Basically, he was the one that started to doubt witchcraft and what have you. And that's when the trial started to die out. Not die out, sort of get less and less. And the book he wrote was actually taken over to America, and it's rumoured that it was used in the Salem witch trials as a kind of guideline sort of thing. I'm not saying it definitely was, but there are stories that it was taken over there and it was used as a guidebook, whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah, so he was a good guy then. He set off another ball rolling, didn't he? He started to question it. Brilliant. Somebody up there's got sense.
the 17th century, the witch trials started to die out, and then people started thinking, maybe there are no witches, maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. Whereas prior to that, they were just slaughtering people. Basically, that's what it was. It was one of the biggest slaughters in 1597. I get my years wrong. Sorry, sir. I said 1690. I think that was 1597. That's when the book came out. So apologies for that, people. I was about 100 years out, but I was kind of in a way. But there is a lot to take in. That's what I found this week, and with the girls as well. They were doing the research. No doubt you as well, Forrest. When they started to do the research into the sheer, well, not in Wales, but other places, the sheer volume of information that there is. You can't remember all, and you need to write it down, and you don't actually realise what happened.
No, it's like Chinese whispers, isn't it? It just gets a bit mulched up into fact and fiction. So,
Aye, exactly. Justin says he sends some. I sent some free picks up as well. He was confused to begin with, and so it's a learning process, Justin. You will. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but I know exactly because it happened to me many years ago. You start to pick up the odd thing, just random. It's no constant. It could be weeks apart, and you do kind of get used to it eventually. Frankie P, we have a white witch a mile from me. That's the other thing I was going to ask you, Forrest. Obviously, back then, 15th, 16th century, witches were just black magic. That's it, Satan's girlfriends, basically. When did the term sort of white witch start to come about? Do you know?
I think it was probably when it started to become acceptable in the 50s, was it? When was the last witch hung? I mean, I read stuff, but because at school we were filled with trigonometry and areas, I haven't got any room left in my brain to remember these things. So the last hanging or the last execution of a witch was in the 1900s, was it? And I think that's when people could discuss it openly.
Sarah will be Googling that right now. Sarah will be Googling that right now. You see the comment coming up.
It was more recent than you think it was. It was definitely in the 20th century, the last case, whether the Witchcraft Act was changed in the 70s or 60s, something like that. But I think then women could start to talk about it more openly. Now, I haven't got any old books on witchcraft in particular, so all my books are from the last 20, 30 years. So I think it was when it started to become more acceptable to discuss whether you're a hedge witch, a green witch, a white witch, and people could start meeting up and having secret meetings and covens and moots and talking about it more openly. So it is quite a recent thing, I'd say, in the last sort of 50, 60 years. We've been able to do it without being persecuted. So that's what I think. Anyway.
It is insane. I thought Sarah was going to look it up and put it in. But you just said a few minutes ago, Chinese whispers. It's like these days with Chinese whispers, and the rumour mill starts turning, and it would have been the same back then. One person tells a story, tells it to somebody else, a wee bit gets added on, then another bit gets added on, and this is probably why there was a vast majority of people in that bracket that were accused back in the 15 and 1600s. I thought Sarah would have Googled that.
It's not really. I mean, there's still places like the Witches of Scotland. Is it the Witches of Scotland? They said, in different cultures, there's still witches. And there is, because there was a little lad that was abandoned at the side of the road. I'm sure it was in Africa, South Africa. And he was only 18 months, 2 years old. And they'd kicked him out of the village to fend for himself because they said he was a witch. I mean, that's just shocking in itself. And I think a lady from America adopted him, this blonde lady, and she just thought, what on earth are you doing to this tiny little wee thing,
The last witch to be hanged, the last execution for witchcraft in England was in 1684. Was the last one.
Well, it must have been an accusation. There was something in the 1900s to do with the last.
There was.
50s. I thought it was the 50s, but again, I might have filled my head up with too much rubbish.
It was Helen Duncan. That's I knew. I remember the name. Helen Duncan was tried as a witch. 1684 in England. I'm not sure
Right.
everywhere. So either I've got it wrong or Sarah's one has got it wrong. But Helen Duncan was the last witch to be tried in 1950s, 60s, I think it was. We done a live on her.
There's something very recent. There's something, I'm sure it's the 50s, and I will have to Google this, so I'm not full of rubbish. But I'm sure it was 19 something. And the Witchcraft Act was changed in the 1900s. There was something recent. Anyway, I'll figure that out on another chat. I'll come back to it.
17th was the last legal execution in Britain of a witch.
I'm sure I'm not making this up. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, I want to do a live ghost hunt at Pendle Hill. Most Haunted did an investigation there. They said the witches were attacking them, making some faint. I thought bull poop, and they were saying they were bad. Don't know. I'd quite like to do a ghost hunt at Pendle, though. I'm up for that.
Well, after the restrictions are lifted, that's our first stop. We're going down to Pendle for about 3 days, and we're actually meeting up with Danny Moss there, and Charlotte Underwood and Simon Entwistle. So we're meeting up with them to do some filming and to do some investigations. So, Wayne, you know you're just north of London. If you want to, make the journey up, it'd be about 4 hours or something maybe. If you want to make the journey up, you're welcome to tag along. Forrest will be there since she's part of the team, so she'll be there with bells on. Sarah's got some dates for us. 77. Edith, Janet. We go for witchcraft, and Janet Horn, her name it was the last one to be executed legally for witchcraft in the British Isles. That's fine, buddy. Sorry for this, just drop us a mail, Wayne, that's totally fine, buddy. But I don't know if it's one thing we missed out in this week. Is there still a Witchcraft Act to this day?
I don't think there is. Like I say, I remember something to do with the 1950s or the 70s, and they abolished the Witchcraft Act, or the last person was accused of it. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but I don't think there is one.
Helen Duncan was the last person in Britain to be tried and sentenced under the 1735. So they renewed the Witchcraft Act in 1735. So that shows you how times had changed over the space of just less than 200 years when the original Witchcraft Act came out to when they actually renewed. Because Henry VIII, he brought out a Witchcraft Act as well, but that only lasted about 3 to 4 years, I think. And the majority of people then were burned, but they weren't called witches, they were called heretics. They were burned at the stake then. You didn't get the option to be hanged. That was the sentence, you were burned and that was it. Whereas England, you were hanged. England then changed it to hanging, and Scotland to burning. 1944, Helen Duncan was tried.
There you go. That might be the one.
So, in history years, it's not that long ago at all.
No, it really isn't. It's
Uh,
a long time. It took a long bloody time to come to that conclusion, but yeah.
As it's a shame the amount. I mean, they estimated between 4,000 and 6,000 people were executed, and during the witch hunts, and I think the most famous ones were. I'm not disrespect to any victim. I think the most famous ones were the Pendle Hill witches. They seem to kind of stick out. But the Witches of Scotland says they are doing that petition to try and get them pardoned. And I hope that they do, because to me, a lot of them were innocent. You know, they might have dabbled with herbs and stuff like that, you know. But to say they were shapeshifters and in league with Satan and what have you, to me, it was a load of bahookie. And that's me putting it politely. What's your thoughts, Forrest? Over all the witch trials, the majority of people, do you think maybe there was somewhere a handful of people that actually did try and summon up the devil and demons and that kind of stuff?
I mean, you know, we haven't changed that much over centuries as humans, so there's going to be people that believe that they can talk to Satan, conjure up demons, spirits. You know, I don't think anything like that would change. So I think people who do things wrong, you know, like women who said they were healers and went to heal babies and it went wrong and the baby dies. It's easy to say they're witches, but they might just have not got the right herbs, you know. So it's just a mental piranha frenzy, wasn't it? Of just control the women, make them fear, you know, and then you get fear more.
Exactly. And usually babies, you know, stillborn, whatever. God rest them. You know, this day and age, are still babies. You still get stillborn babies, and you know, it's nothing to do with herbs and that. It's something to do with the mother or the baby. You know, whatever. There's loads of reasons why a child can be born. You know, stillborn basically. But back then, you were a witch. You killed my baby. End of story. You know,
If
so
you had stillborn baby, you were wrong and you were in league with the devil because your baby's come out stillborn. You know, there was no escape from it, was there really, until it did calm down.
yeah, we'll end with this comment from Sarah. As far as I know, the Witchcraft Act was replaced with the Fraudulent Mediums Act, which was repealed in 2008. But our first ever live was about mediums. I remember way back in the day. That was our first ever live about mediums. But I want to do another, you know, redo that one, and now we kind of further down the line do a live about mediums. You know, are some real, are some fake, that kind of thing. But that's for another time. So that's the end of Witch Week. Thank you very much, Forrest, for coming in. But also, I hope you after we go off live. I hope you've learned something, maybe a couple of things. You know, I know I have. So that's the end of Witch Week, folks. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope maybe you've learned a thing or two about the witch trials and all the victims, unfortunate victims. We've enjoyed it, and Sarah and I want to say a massive thank you to our whole team, Forrest included, obviously, for the amount of effort and research they put in. Thank you very much, Frankie, for the amount of effort and research they put in, and for doing the lives and what have you. They've been absolutely amazing. And so that's us till next Tuesday, no, tell a lie, Wednesday, the 24th. And we're back with Patty and Charlotte next Wednesday at 10 p.m. Next Wednesday night. So do please come in. And just before we go, just like say again that Forrest is now officially a member of Paranormal History. So welcome again, Forrest. And just thanks very much, Simon. And final note, just we go, mind, spare a wee thought, a wee prayer for Colin from Caledonia, paranormal investigations team, who sadly left us last night. He'll always be remembered. So that's it, folks. Mind go to the Facebook page for Witches of Scotland's, all the links and the details on Instagram, what have you, and be safe. And we'll see you. Hopefully, we'll see you. What day did I say? Wednesday. We'll see you next Wednesday. So take care of the now, folks, and bye. Thanks, Simon.